that child to the most diverse microbiome possible. Well, that birthing room is going to look a hell of a lot like an organic garden. Mm-hmm. And we're going to stop birthing in sterile, ICU-type buildings. We're going to start to well, what would that schoolyard look like if that child needs maximum biodiversity? And what will be the thoughts of that child when they have so much genetic information at their disposal, at the fingertips of their neural system? They are sensing not human input, but viral input. Not just viral input, but the input of the breath of nature itself. What thought will that child have? And what expanse can we expand that lens of consciousness to so that it can see the scope of the beauty that we are born within on Mother Earth, sitting in this distant galaxy within the scale of the universe? We are sitting in an energetic moment in this great universe. It's been prophesied that we are one of the chakra centers in the universe. And if we choose to step up and expand that lens, open up the aperture to understand the truth of what it means to be given life in this galaxy, on this planet, we will stabilize not just our planet, but the universe. And so that's an interesting prophecy. And maybe the more concrete one is that of the Achuar people, who have been dreaming this moment in human history for 40,000 years, and have predicted it down to really a decade in which this will happen. Starting in 2012, moving to 2022, humanity is going to go through a transformation because it's going to open up its second wing. The bird of humanity has been flying in circles, doing the same thing over and over again in a downward spiral since its origin, because we only had the masculine wing unfurled. Starting in 2012, we will unfurl the feminine wing. And for the first time in human history, the Achuar people see us flying straight. And when the bird of humanity flies straight, we will leave behind the cycles of slavery, violence, conquest, ownership, and we will start a new epoch of 50,000 years that the bird flies straight into a future of co-creation where it participates in adaptation and biodiversity. And it will dwarf any version of beauty that you and I can imagine in our minds right now. It will be so sentiently stimulating to be alive in a million years. In the next 50,000, we will see an explosion of life on Earth if we fly straight and we break the cycles of empire build and collapse, wealth accumulation and greed. When we break those cycles and fly straight, we will go. And so what does the feminine wing look like? What is that going to look like? It means we're going to move from this goal-oriented masculine mind, kill the virus, to a process-oriented mindset. The feminine archetype is a process-oriented mindset where it says, what process will we put in play in which humans are never in conflict with the virus? That's the journey we're now on. And so I'm excited to see that wing unfurl. And it will certainly look a lot like the elevation of women on this planet. We will elevate the feminine voice. We will elevate the feminine consciousness and that broader lens that's natural to the feminine. The ability to, multitask and see ourselves in the context of nurture, back and forth, receiving as much as we're giving, receiving instead of stealing, And so this feminine archetype is going to have to emerge not from just the women on the planet, but for every man, woman, and child. Is going to have the opportunity to embrace a balance between the process-oriented and the goal-oriented, and we could fly straight and create something that right now you and I can't imagine.
So I think people know when they're hearing truth. And if someone watching you right now and listening to this and saying, wow, I have a deep innate sense that this is true, the question would come up, well, what role can I play in this? I mean, what you're saying is very empowering because it feels like tyrannical powers have taken over. We're being oppressed, all of which is true. And I feel sort of helpless, and I have fear, and I got my family to protect, etc. But then we get to this context of saying this is a inflection point that we just happen to be born into, and we can imagine now how this might create a great awakening. The second wing unfolds, and now we soar into a new future that the potential and the vision of that is exhilarating. Now the question is, what role can I play in this? Though here I am, in this. So what if somebody were to come to you? Anywhere, that would say, I heard this, I agree, what's my role? What would you say?
I would say the first thing that we have to do is give up the male response to that question, which is, I need to fix the problem. And so that masculine mind is like, oh my God, how are we going to fix this? How can I help fix this? And so that masculine mindset that is all of humanity right now needs to surrender, and we need to realize, oh my gosh, we are each ancient souls. We have a spirit within us that we could call a spirit or soul or just energy. We have an energy within us that has recycled in life trillions of times in the epochs of the universe collapsing and expanding, How many times has the universe done that? And so in this expansion of the universe that we're currently in, you showed up right now on purpose. Not in your human mind, but in your deep energetic soul. You showed up on purpose. And so the first thing we have to do is surrender to a deeper knowingness. that we showed up on purpose, and we showed up with clear identity within that greater context of the universe, life, whatever we want to call it. So we have a knowingness in us. And so what is your role in this tipping point of human history? You already know it. It needs to be unburied. And the beginning point that we could perhaps point to right now, in a poignant fashion given the pandemic, is you need to let go of your fear of death, and you need to get into the exuberance of life. Start to make strides towards being exuberant in your fact that you are alive. You are alive right now. Mercy, that's beautiful. That is so miraculous that you showed up right now at the tipping point of all things. 200,000 years of human history. You're here now on purpose. Silent the human mind, that masculine mind, that there's problems and bad guys and good guys. No, there's humanity, which is a terminal cancer. How do we remember the original math of life? How do we vibrate to life instead of fear of death? We chase fear of death in any position that you take in opposition or promulgating anything. We'll see the demise of our species. If we let go of the fear of death and we start to embrace the experience of being alive, sentient, and listen within, this access point to the lens of consciousness into the greater knowingness of the universe happens deep in our biology. We have a neurologic center that can take up our mind and our thought. We have seemingly an energetic center somewhere in our chest that emanates emotional signaling and sensing. And down here we have knowingness of who we are, why we came, and what we're here to do. And scripture of any religious background speaks to this. You read the English version, it always says the heart, the heart of God or the heart of man. But that word in the Greek or the Hebrew is always the gut. And so what the real heart of being alive is known is right here. And so start to have the discipline to come out of your mind and head south. But don't stop at the emotional center, because this is a complete disaster right now. And so move past the emotional epicenter into the knowingness field and start to know what it feels like to be alive. I guarantee you have been disconnected from this just as the Oxford Dictionary has disconnected you from nature. You have forgotten what it feels like to have feet, because the last time you paid attention to your toes was maybe when you were 4 running across a field of wildflowers for the last time, and now you've been in Nikes ever since. You haven't touched Mother Earth and felt her exuberance of life under your feet. And so we need to tie back into this childlike experience of being alive and realizing we have no responsibility in the human mind or human intellect to solve for our crises. The crises was that we began to trust in those things. And we thought that we had a responsibility. We thought that we had ownership. We thought that we had dominion over this earth. It's when we find out that we were called to stewardship, and that we were called into relationship with this nature. And the beauty of relationship when it is holy and when it is free is that it is never dogmatic. It is never controlling. It is always an opening. It is always an invitation to the soul. And so we need to answer that invitation. We need to step up, and we need to be coherent with the original vibration of life in the bacterium, in the nematode, in the soil systems, in the air we breathe, in the life I can give to others. There is an opportunity for us to co-create, integrate, coordinate, become coherent again.
That's beautiful. The philosopher Ayn Rand, in Atlas Shrugged, when she wrote that, to portray her philosophy, one of the protagonists of the story is asked the question, what's the most depraved type of individual that exists on Earth? When you think murderer, pedophile, rapist, and the response was, they said the man Ball say, the person without purpose. And I think that's what you're talking about here, is this acknowledgement of being alive, and then having a purpose in that life is what
Animates us.
It's the animation of the experience and the fulfillment of the potential, right? So this is just a beautiful view of the possibilities that rather shrink in darkness and fear of what's going on right now, and then further lament about how things used to be. Because I think a lot of people are under an illusion that prior to COVID, things were just fine. And look what happened. Life was great, and now life has become this, and things weren't fine. This was, in your description, this was an inevitability and a necessary one, because if we could wake up, and that's the whole thing, we're asleep at the wheel, but if we can now literally wake up, then the possibilities for the future become very exciting.
Yeah. And I want to just encourage everybody in that moment as they start to kind of reimagine connecting to some deep known purpose, that you need to embrace the journey into that experience. And your experience is going to be dominated by the experience of friction. So as you start to quiet the mind and you start to slow down compared to the common narrative and the march of this human machine, the tumor and its growth and the cancer that spreads, as you become different from that, it's going to create an enormous amount of friction around you. And there's going to be this tendency to say, oh, well, now I'm in pain, or now I have less economic power, or now I have this or that because the friction around me is tearing energy off of me. That experience is necessary at the beginning of the journey. And the increase in friction is going to guide you on the path. So relax into the friction.
Yeah.
Celebrate the pain. Celebrate the discomfort that's going to naturally happen when you let go of the machine and start to float in a different flow. And as you start to float in a different flow, you're literally going to reverse directions, because right now you are in opposition to nature. In your consumerism, in your psychology, in your spirituality, you are against nature. As you let go of that momentum of humanity and you surrender to the greater stream of life in the universe and on this planet, you're going to be swept up. And there's going to be rocks in the way, and there's going to be boundaries that you're going to be bumping into, and the friction will become extreme at moments. Acknowledge it and know that it's not anything but temporary, and it's just a redirect to show you back into the flow state. Don't grab onto that rock and suddenly make your identity, I am in pain. No, you're experiencing pain momentarily, but don't make it your identity. And this is the danger of being an activist. As soon as you become an activist against something, you have to cling to that thing so that you continue to maintain your identity of being against that thing. In this very moment, we all feel this need to do something, to reject the common paradigm. Let go of the common paradigm. Just release. It's a surrender, not a battle. Surrender to the machine and let it continue on its path. Because what it was hoping is that you would cling on and donate your slave-like labor to its momentum. The moment you let go, it takes no effort. It's the opposite of effort. It takes a resignation. It takes a surrender, a freeing moment. You're going to start going the other way, and there's going to be frictions. But this time, the forward momentum of all the powers that be, the empire builders and the wealth extractors, have no control over you, because the frictions that are occurring are nature interacting with you and moving you into the current that it intended for you originally. And a beautiful thing starts to emerge is that it turns out there's other water molecules going that way, and you're going to start bumping into those, and you're going to have community that is so beautiful and is so in line with not just you, but our natural state, so in line with the mechanisms by which infinite energy gets tapped into. There is no such thing as scarcity in nature. And when you let the scarcity mindset and scarcity machine move forward, it will distance itself from you further every day. And you will want less, and you will need less, and you will experience more, and you will receive more, and you will weep for the simplicity of life and the realization of how much you are loved to be here right now at the tipping point of all things, how valuable you must be to be selected, to be one that would surrender the control and become part of something greater than yourself.
I'm just taking a moment to let that all just settle in. I don't think anything more can be said. You said it beautifully, and I so appreciate you showing up here and expressing in the way that you do, in the way that you just did. And I know it's going to make a difference, in the right kind of a difference in people's lives. So appreciate you, and so appreciate how you showed up here and your willingness to be vulnerable, transparent, and share your view of things.
I'm so grateful for the opportunity. That's the way we exercise self, and you gave me a great opportunity. And so thank you for each of you listening, for being a part of that. You are the matrix. You are the fabric of everything, and you just let me play in that fabric for a moment. You let me jump in your sandbox and ruffle things up for a moment. I'm just grateful for that. That takes a resource that is most precious in the human linear experience, which is time. So thank you for the time spent. Thank you for the expertise around us in this room that makes this storytelling and this technology possible to reach out and connect in a spiritual fashion that reaches beyond the lenses of these cameras, beyond the awareness of you and I, and we become this ultra force. We become this interpretation of the knowledge field of the world through our shared consciousness, and it wouldn't happen without the community. And so I'm thrilled to be a very small and massive part of it.
All at once. Thank you, Zach. That completes my interview with Dr. Zach Bush. Again, the word that comes to mind, transcendent. Amazing human being, a great spirit, someone that we can listen to and learn from and have a better life as a result. Early intervention is a big and controversial topic when it comes to COVID, and we're going to be covering it quite a bit in this series. Dr. Bryan Ardis is someone who has jumped in and dug deep into following some trails when it comes to what recommendations our government agencies have been around treatments for COVID, especially some of them that are considered early interventions, and what they're suggesting and why. What he reveals here is quite startling. This is a two-part interview. We're about to start with part one, but you're going to want to see both parts of this interview. Enjoy this conversation I had with Dr. Bryan Ardis. Dr. Bryan Ardis, thanks for coming in. You've been making some waves lately.
It appears so. Yeah, I've got attention of a few people.
What has got you so engaged in this whole COVID scenario? Like, why'd you take an interest here?
Yeah, I really had no intention. I've actually stated many times to my wife that I had no wants to propel myself into this thing. Had no interest whatsoever. I actually sold my practices after 17 years in the end of 2018 and had gone off and started formulating my own nutritional products in several different companies. But early February in 2020, before COVID hit Texas or the States, we live in Dallas, Texas, my father-in-law, Weldon, walked into a hospital with complaints of headache and a fever. That's all he had. He's independent, very healthy, walks into a hospital in Dallas. They diagnose him with the flu on day one. This is the setup for why I've been in the media nonstop since COVID. So day one, he goes in the hospital, they diagnose him with the flu. Day two, they call us to tell us that he's now diagnosed with pneumonia. Day three, they call us to tell us he's now in acute kidney failure. Day five, they call us and tell us that he is now going in and out of consciousness. And that's when we went up to the hospital for the first time, was on the evening of the 5th.
Did he have a history of kidney problems?
No.
Oh, so did it puzzle you that they said he had kidney failure?
Yes. So the issue was, and the reason why we weren't up there on day 1 through 5 was my wife's mother had actually fallen 3 days before her dad went into the hospital and had broken her neck.
Oh, wow.
2 vertebrae in her neck. So she was at a rehab center, in the rehab center finding out that her husband at another hospital was actually diagnosed with the flu. They asked us not to go over there and visit him because they didn't want us bringing the flu back to this group of individuals at the rehab center that were elderly. So we respected those wishes and let my wife's sister stay with her dad at the hospital. And so we were just being called with reports as we were with Jane's mother. But these were all very disturbing. And so by the time I learned he was in acute kidney failure day 3 and now going in and out of consciousness and being put on forced air,